Welcome to the final part of Beowulf. Today I'm going to finish reading the epic to you, and we'll see what happens to our epic hero. Beowulf becomes king of the Geats. After the battle, Beowulf brings Grendel's head and the giant's sword back to Heorot as tribute to Hrothgar, and Beowulf is awarded many more valuables for his bravery. But most importantly, Hrothgar teaches Beowulf what it means to be a good king and to respect life. Before the Geats return home, Hrothgar proclaims Beowulf fit to be king of the Geats. And once home in Geatland, Beowulf recounts his tales and shares his treasure with Hygelac. King Hygelac, in turn, awards Beowulf with the best sword and treasure that the Geats own. Although Beowulf had at times been poorly regarded, his status as a brave warrior was now set, and he carried himself with valor and restraint, never harming those who were drunken or brawling, until King Hygelac is killed in battle, and then the wide kingdom reverted to Beowulf. He ruled it well for 50 winters, and grew old and wise as warden of the land, until one began to dominate the dark, a dragon on the prowl. From the steep vaults of the stone-roofed barrow where he guarded a hoard, there was a hidden passage unknown to men, but someone managed to enter it and interfere with the heathen trove. He had handled and removed a gem-studded goblet. It gained him nothing, though with a thief's wiles he had outwitted the sleeping dragon that drove him into a rage, as the people of that country would soon discover. The intruder who broached the dragon's treasure and moved him to wrath had never meant to. It was desperation on the part of a slave fleeing the heavy hand of some master, guilt-ridden and on the run, going to ground. But he soon began to shake with terror, in shock. The wretch panicked and ran away with the precious metalwork. And there were many other heirlooms heaped up inside the earth house, because long ago, with deliberate care, somebody, now forgotten, had buried the riches of a high-born race in this ancient cache. Death had come and taken them all in times gone by, and the only one left to tell their tale, the last of their line, could look forward to nothing but the same fate for himself. He foresaw that his joy in the treasure would be brief. A newly constructed barrow stood waiting on a wide headland close to the waves, its entryway secured. Into it the keeper of the hoard had carried all the goods and golden ware worth preserving. His words were few. Now earth holds what earls once held and heroes can no more. It was minded from you first by honorable men. My own people have been ruined in war, and one by one they went down to death and looked their last on sweet life in the hall. I am left with nobody to bear a sword or burnish plated goblets and put a sheen on the cup. The companies have departed. The hard helmet hasped with gold will be stripped of its hoops, and the helmet shiner who should polish the metal of the war mask sleeps. The coat of mail that came through all fights, through shield collapse and cut of sword decays with the warrior, nor many webbed mail range far and wide on the warlord's back, besides his mustered troops. No trembling harp, no turned timber, no tumbling hawk. Swerving through the hall, no swift horse pawing the courtyard, pillage and slaughter have emptied the earth of entire peoples. And so he mourned as he moved about the world, deserted and alone, lamenting his unhappiness day and night, until death's flood brimmed up in his heart. Then the old harrower of the dark happened to find the hoard open. The burning one who hots out barrows, the slick-skinned dragon threatening the night sky with tremors of fire. People in the farms are in dread of him. He is driven to hunt out hoards underground, to guard heather gold through age-long vigils, though to no avail. For 3 centuries the scourge of the people had stood guard on that stoutly protected underground treasury, until the intruder unleashed its fury. He hurried to his lord with gold-plated cup and made his plea to be reinstated. And then the vault was rifled, the ring hoard robbed, and the wretched man had his request granted. His master gazed on that find from the past for the first time. When the dragon awoke, trouble flared again. He rippled down the rock, writhing with anger, when he saw the footprints of the prowler who had stolen too close to his dreaming head. So may a man not marked by fate easily escape exile and woe by the grace of God. Beowulf attacks the dragon. The dragon continues to attack the villages and farms of Geatland. Even Beowulf's home, the throne room, is burned to the ground. Beowulf orders an all-iron shield to replace his wooden one. In his old age, this is a very dangerous battle, yet Beowulf was too proud to call up a large army. Instead, he recalls the glorious battles of his youth, including the fight with Grendel and the many fights he had as the king of the Geats. And so the son of Ecgtheow had survived every extreme, excelling himself in daring and in danger, until the day arrived when he had come face to face with the dragon. The lord of the Geats took 11 comrades and went in a rage to reconnoiter, and the veteran king sat down on the cliff top. He wished good luck to the Geats who had shared his hearth and his gold. He was sad at heart, unsettled yet ready, sensing his death. His fate hovered near, unknowable but certain. It would soon claim his coffered soul, part life from limb before long. The prince's spirit would spin free from his body. Beowulf recounted his childhood and several battles between the Geats and the Swedes. And in the most recent skirmish, the Swedish king is killed by one of Hygelac's thanes, at the time a peer with Beowulf. In this foreshadows the continued strife between the Swedes and the Geats. Beowulf spoke and made a formal boast for the last time. I risked my life often when I was young, and now I am old. But as the king of the people, I shall pursue this fight for the glory of winning. If the evil one will only abandon his earth fort and face me in the open. Then he addressed each dear companion one final time, those fighters in their helmets, resolute and high-born. I would rather not use a weapon if I knew another way to grapple with a dragon and make good my boast as I did against Grendel in days gone by. But I shall soon be meeting molten venom in the fire he breathes, so I go forth in mail shirt and shield. I won't shift a foot when I meet the cave guard. What occurs on the wall between the two of us will turn out as fate, overseer of men, decides. I am resolved. I scorn further words against this sky-born foe. Men at arms, remain here on the barrow, safe in your armor, to see which one of us is better in the end at bearing wounds in a deadly fray. This fight is not yours, nor is it up to any man except me to measure his strength against the monster or to prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle, will bear your lord away. Then he drew himself up beside his shield. The fabled warrior in his war shirt and helmet trusted his own strength entirely and went under the crag. No coward path, hard by the rock face, that hale veteran, a good man who had gone repeatedly into combat in danger and come through, saw a stone arch and a gushing stream that burst from the barrow, blazing and wafting a deadly heat. It would be hard to survive unscathed near the horde, to hold firm against the dragon in those flaming depths. Then he gave a shout. The lord of the Geats unburdened his breast and broke out in a storm of anger, and under grey stone his voice challenged and resounded clearly. Hate was ignited. The horde guard recognized a human voice. The time was over for peace and parleying. Pouring forth in a hot battle fume, the breath of the monster burst from the rock. And there was a rumble underground, and down there in the barrow, Beowulf the warrior lifted his shield, The outlandish thing writhed and convulsed and viciously turned on the king, whose keen-edged sword, an heirloom inherited by the ancient right, was already in his hand. Roused to a fury, each antagonist struck terror in the other. Unyielding, the lord of the people loomed by his tall shield, sure of his ground, while the serpent looped and unleashed itself. Swallowed in flames, it came gliding and flexing and racing towards its fate. Yet his shield defended the renowned leader's life and limb, for a shorter time than he meant it to. That final day was the first time when Beowulf fought and fate denied him glory in battle. And so the king of the Geats raised his hand and struck hard at the enameled scales, but scarcely cut through. The blade flashed and slashed, yet the blow was far less powerful than the hard-pressed king had need of at that moment. And the mound keeper went into a spasm and spouted deadly flames where he felt the stroke. Battle fire billowed and spewed. And Beowulf was foiled of a glorious victory. The glittering sword, infallible before that day, failed when he unsheathed it, as it never should have. For the son of Ecgtheow, it was no easy thing to have to give ground like that and go unwillingly to inhabit another home and a place beyond. So every man must yield the leasehold of his days. And before long, the fierce contenders clashed again, and the horde guard took heart and hailed and swelled up and got a new wind. And he who had once ruled was furled in fire and had to face the worst. No help or backing was to be had then from his highborn comrades. That hand-picked troop broke ranks and ran for their lives to the safety of the wood. But within one heart sorrow welled up. In a man worth the claims of kinship cannot be denied. His name was Wiglaf, a son of Westons, a well-regarded chiefling Swedish warrior. And now the youth was to enter the line of battle with his lord, his first time to be tested as a fighter. His spirit did not break, and the ancestral blade would keep its edge, as the dragon discovered as they soon came together in combat. Sad at heart, addressing his companions, Wiglaf spoke wise and fluent words. I remember the time when mead was flowing, and how we pledged loyally to our lord in the hall, and promised our ring giver we would be worth our price. Make good the gift of the war gear, those swords and helmets, as and when his need required it. He picked us out from the army deliberately, and honored us and judged us fit for his action, and made me these lavish gifts. And all because he considered us the best of his arm-bearing thanes. And now, although he wanted this challenge to be one he'd face by himself alone, the shepherd of our land, a man unequaled in the quest for glory and a name for daring, now the day has come when this Lord we serve needs sound men to give him their support. Let us go to him and help our leader through the hot flame and dread of the fire, as God is my witness. I would rather my body were robed in the same burning blaze as my gold giver's body than go back home bearing arms. That is unthinkable, unless we have first slain the foe and defended the life of the prince of the Weather Geats. I well know the things he has done for us deserve better. Should he alone be left exposed to fall in battle? We must bond together, shield and helmet, mail shirt and sword. And then he waded the dangerous reek and went under arms to his lord, saying only, Go one! Dear Beowulf, do everything you said you would when you were still young and vowed you would never let your name and fame be dimmed while you lived. Your deeds are famous. So stay resolute, my lord, and defend your life now with the whole of your strength. I shall stand by you. And after those words, a wildness rose again in the dragon and drove it to attack, heaving up fire, hunting for enemies, the humans it loathed. And flames lapped the shield and charred it to the boss, and the body armor of the young warrior was useless to him. But Wiglaf did well under the wide rim. Beowulf shared with him once his own had shattered in sparks and ashes. Inspired again by the thought of glory, the war king threw his whole strength behind the sword stroke and connected with the skull. And Nagling, the sword, snapped. Beowulf's ancient iron gray sword let him down in the fight. It was never his fortune to be helped in combat by the cutting edge of weapons made of iron. When he wielded a sword, no matter how blooded and hard edged the blade, his hand was too strong. The stroke he dealt, I have heard, would ruin it. He could reap no advantage. And then the bane of that people, the fire breathing dragon, was mad to attack for a third time. And when a chance came, he caught the hero in a rush of flame and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran wet with his lifeblood. It came welling out. Next thing, they say, the noble son of Weston, Wiglaf, saw the king in danger at his side and displayed his inborn bravery and strength. He left his head alone, but his fighting hand was burned when he came to his kinsman's aid. He lunged at the enemy lower down so that his decorated sword sank into its belly and the flames grew weaker. And once again, the king gathered his strength and drew a stabbing knife he carried on his belt, sharpened for battle, and he struck it deep into the dragon's flank. But Beowulf dealt it a deadly wound. They had killed the enemy. Courage quelled his life. That pair of kinsmen, partners in nobility, had destroyed the foe. So every man should act, be at hand when needed. But now for the king, that would be the last of his many labors and triumphs in the world. Then the wound, dealt by the ground burner earlier, began to scald and swell. And Beowulf discovered deadly poison suppurating inside of him, surges of nausea. And so, in his wisdom, the prince realized his state and struggled towards a seat on the rampart. He steadied his gaze on those gigantic stones, saw how the earthwork was braced with arches built over columns, and how that Thane, unequaled for goodness, with his own hands washed his lord's wounds, swabbed the weary prince with water, bathed him clean, unbuckled his helmet. And Beowulf spoke in spite of his wounds, mortal wounds. He still spoke, for he well knew his days in the world had been lived out to the end. His allotted time was drawing to a close. Death was very near. And Beowulf asked Wiglaf to go into the barrow and examine the dragon's treasure before bringing some to Beowulf. The dying king wants to see what he gave his life for, so Wiglaf did as he commanded. And once Wiglaf returned with the gold, Beowulf gave thanks to the everlasting Lord of all and asked to be buried in the barrow on the coast to remind his people and sailors of his brave deeds. Then the king, in his great hardness, unclasped the collar of gold from his neck and gave it to the young Thane, telling him to use it in the war shirt and the gilded helmet well. You are the last of us, the only one left of the Wangundings. Fate swept us all away and sent my whole brave highborn clan to their final doom, and now I must follow them. And that was the warrior's last word. He had no more to confide. The furious heat of the pyre would assail him. His soul fled from his breast to its destined place among the steadfast ones. It was hard then on the young hero, having to watch the one he held so dear there on the ground, going through his death agony. The dragon from under earth, his nightmarish destroyer, lay destroyed as well, utterly without life. The treasure had been won, been bought and paid for by Beowulf's death, and both had reached the end of the road through the life they had been lent. And soon the deserters returned, and Wiglaf berated them for the cowards that they were. He recounted the battle and the ongoing feuds, the Swedes, and predicts that Beowulf's death and the rumors of deserting soldiers, and it is only a matter of time before they are then invaded. Wiglaf quickly ordered 7 men to collect the dragon's treasure, and they quickly set foot about preparing Beowulf's barrow along the high cliffs of the shore. After building a large pyre adorned with swords and shield, they burned Beowulf's body. And what remained after the fire was placed in the barrow as a memorial to the great king. And 12 riders circled the barrow, lamenting and telling the great deeds of great King Beowulf. They extolled his heroic nature and exploits, and gave thanks for his greatness, which was the proper thing, for a man should praise whom he holds dear and cherish his memory when that moment comes when he has to be conveyed from his bodily home. So the Geat people, his hearth companions, sorrowed for the lord who had been laid low, and they said that of all kings upon the earth, he was the man most gracious and fair minded, kindest to his people, and keenest to win fame. The end. And that's the end of Beowulf. And in this section, you're probably wondering, well, that sounds like a tragedy. That's not Beowulf winning in the end. But this is where the Christianity elements come here, and this is why Beowulf succeeds in his hero's journey. When he fights the dragon and he's bitten and killed, he goes to the afterlife. So ultimately, his reward is to be remembered forever, not only in the story, but also to go to heaven and all that jazz. So Beowulf succeeds in his task, and the hero's journey cycle is now completed.